All right, guys, so we are done with the router, and next up is the miter saw. A couple quick notes that you need to take care of anytime you want to use the miter saw. You should always check with me first. Reason being, probably the dangers with the miter saw. Better safe than sorry. I always want to be around here with this machine to make sure that you stay safe. It only takes one simple thing for us to forget and we hurt ourselves. So we're going to make sure we don't hurt ourselves. Other thing on our list is vacuum cleaner, right? Make sure we turn the vacuum cleaner on anytime that you use the miter saw. Those two things super important before we get started. So here we are at the miter saw, okay? Things that we need to think about. First is how to operate this machine. If you remember from Mr. Gembar's, this is a slide miter saw, which means that the machine slides out towards you to cut. We would push down. While we hold down, we would push back. And then once we are done cutting, we could lift up the blade. For a lot of the things I do in my class, to be honest with you, this knob right here, I lock it down so that we use it like a traditional miter saw where we only have to put the saw blade down to cut our material and then lift it back up. If you remember to start the machine, right, there is a thumb button right here. So I get closer, right, thumb button right here that you have to push down before you pull the trigger right here to operate this machine. Okay, so without that thumb button, that's a safety device that we have there. You cannot turn this machine on. You can see the guard, right? The guard will retract as you cut into the material and then cover the blade up again. Super important to know. Material, any material that you put on this machine has to go, again, against the fence. So the fence that is on the machine right here is where material has to go against. That's like a backstop, right? The blade spins towards the back of the sawdust box. So if I was to just put a piece of material, if I grab a piece of material, right, and I just place it on the table and I cut into it, it's going to want to push this towards the back of the machine. So again, I have to make sure it always goes against that fence when or before I actually cut. My hand placement. So my left hand is going to hold the material. And what you need to know is to keep your hands out of this area that I put red tape on, right? We do not want red underneath our hand. That is danger. So my hand, usually what I say, the outside of this fence right here, I say put your index finger on that, and then you just want to place your hand on top of the material. You do not have to hold on super tight. What am I trying to accomplish here with my left hand? I want to hold the material down against the table, and I want to hold it against the fence so it does not move. Those are the two things that I want to take care of. My right hand, so my left hand is holding on to the material. If you remember from Mr. Gembar last year, you may have used a clamp, and in some instances you can use a clamp, but I'm telling you as of right now, we're using our left hand to hold on to the material. My right hand is going to operate the saw. So this is what's going to operate the saw. And last year I know you guys probably used both hands to operate this part as the clamp held your material down. So you can forget about that. We're not doing that this year. Your right hand is going to operate the saw. Your left hand is going to hold the material against the fence and make sure it stays down against the table. So there are many different ways to use the miter saw. Sometimes all you have to do is make a measurement out of a piece of material and then line up the blade to that measurement. So if that was our goal, right, we know the length of the piece of material, we maybe have like one or two of them to cut, we can measure and mark it. I put a mark on this board. You can see it right there. and then I can line up the blade and lower it down to do the things that I need to do, right? What I would end up doing is, again, the material goes against the backstop, and then I would want to move the material under the blade. But then I need to line it up, and I'm going to see if I can do a good job of this with the video camera. I'm going to try to line up that blade with, okay, that mark. Now what I have to keep in mind here is I want the good side not to get cut into, right? So I have to think about the blade. Do I want the left side of the blade, right? The left side or the right side of the blade just to touch that liner mark. Since I'm going to call or say that that piece that I have right now, the mark, okay, is to the right of it is the good material that I want to keep, I am just going to touch the right side of the blade to that mark. And if I get down here and lower this blade down, let's see how we do this. So I'm going to lower that down. I'm hoping this comes out good. I want to see if that blade is just going to touch that line. If it's not going to, which it looks like it's off, right, I need to move that material out of the way. Now, one thing that I see people doing while they're moving is they'll put their hand right here to move it around. And hopefully that you can see if I do that and I lower the saw blade, right, where's my finger? And what if I accidentally start that blade? That is not good. So again, hand placement always outside of the red area here as I'm lining up my piece of material so that the line just touches the right side of the blade. That's what our goal is there. And that is one of two ways to use this saw. Okay, so the other way to cut material, say we have a lot of pieces to cut, which we do. We have 4 different sides to this box that we're making, and everybody in the class needs those boxes to be the same size. So instead of, to kind of make things go a little bit faster, instead of waiting for each person to measure their pieces and then cut them, and because of accuracy, we can set up something called a stop block. Pretty simple. All we do is take a scrap piece of wood and we clamp that down to the table at whatever size we want every piece to be. After we do that, we can move our material. Again, it goes against the fence, right? It goes to that stop block, and then we can cut. And every piece that we cut is going to be the same exact size because it's all pre-measured out. So we eliminate measuring, we increase our accuracy. It's kind of like we're creating a little bit of automation here, right? Where we are a lot more accurate. If we're hand measuring everything, there is that level of human error that we want to avoid. And again, we want to maybe pick up the pace a little bit and go a little bit faster with keeping ourselves nice and safe. Now, to use the stop block, it's super important that you do one extra thing, right? We, again, are holding the material with our left hand. We are using the saw with our right hand. Now, when we cut through the material, I'll move the camera to the other side, and we're done cutting it, we have a problem here. We have that piece of wood stuck in between the blade and that stop block. So what we need to make sure to do is leave the saw, or turn the saw off, and then leave the saw blade down until it stops spinning. If we don't, the blade is spinning and we lift the saw up, what happens is that piece of wood gets stuck in between the blade and the piece of wood. It lifts up and it probably will end up flinging somewhere. Okay, and we don't want that to happen. So super important. I'll show you this. I'll set up the camera so that it's stationary while I cut this to go through everything. But super important right now that because we're using a stop block, we are holding the material with our left hand. We're operating the saw with our right hand. Once we cut through the material, we need to wait until the blade stops spinning before we lift the saw up so that we don't shoot that piece of wood we'll end up destroying that piece of wood that we want, and then we're just wasting material. So I'm going to set this camera up so that I can see all of this stuff for you. I will go through the entire process so that you can see it, and then we will, or you will, be good to start working and using the miter saw.